Thank you for tuning in. This is Teach Me to Freelance, your source for all things related to starting, growing, and maintaining your freelance business. I'm your host, Jonathan Clem. This week, we're going to discuss cultivating healthy client relationships. Now, when you're first starting out, you may either be more inclined to take on clients because you need the money or the experience more, or you could just be unaware of what kind of clients or what kind of projects best work for you. Either way, when you're first starting out, you're likely going to struggle to find clients that you work well with. Eventually, as you start to progress, you're going to want to pay closer attention to who you're working with. When I first started freelancing, I first started off on Elance, and there it was very tough to get started. I was competing with individuals in Pakistan and India and all that, these other places with lower costs of living, and I was, getting outbid, on a price base, and I wasn't able to compete on a quality basis because, I didn't really have a large body of work or a portfolio or any of that I could really use to impress new clients. So starting out, I worked with a wide range of individuals, different technologies and different different sized organizations, different dynamics. But eventually I was able to, take on more and more clients. And as I was able to get more clients, I was able to become more choosy about, who those clients were. You'll likely have a transition period there. You may not, though. You may be lucky enough that, as you've transitioned to freelancing, maybe you've been working a full-time job, elsewhere, and you've kind of just eased into it. But either way, if starting out you can be more choosy because, you're just easing into it, or if, you've been kind of just accepting a bunch of clients and now you start to see that, you have to pick and choose. It's important to start weeding out bad clients at this phase. And there are some standard clients that you most likely want to avoid. These aren't hard and fast rules, uh, but merely observations that I've had, based off of my experience freelancing. The first type of client is the ASAP or the rush job client. Now, these can be very good clients. It could just so happen that something, fell through for them, and now they're approaching the deadline and they really need somebody. It could be that events completely out of their control transpired and left them in a situation where they need somebody quick, fast, and in a hurry. And if you can be that somebody and you can impress them with the quality of your work and the speed with which you complete the task, that you could very well have a lifelong client on your hands, and they could be one of your better clients, However, it's been my experience that if an individual finds themselves in a position where they're scrambling around, this isn't the first time that it's happened. There could have been a myriad of different things that happened to make this come about. It could have been that they sat on the project and it wasn't a situation where they were just surprised by the sudden need, but rather they had failed to plan or forgotten about it or pushed it off to the point where now it's crunch time. Could also be that they had another person that was working on the project, and they somehow did something, either to anger or turn off that individual or company, or it could have been that they were so difficult to work with, or they just got frustrated and they decide that rather than uh, working on the communication, they decide they were just going to jump ship and try and find somebody else. Either way, it doesn't really either way, it's not really a good indicator on their end of their professionalism. Which brings us to the next point here, which is you want to be on the lookout for any hint of a lack of professionalism. If you're finding out about them through an email, or if you're using Elance, Upwork, or however you found out about them, or found the job, if you're noticing that they're using profanities or poor grammar or spelling mistakes, and this is all subjective, right? If Are you going to be a stickler on their grammar? I don't think that it's necessarily bad if they have one or two common mistakes or something like that, in their communication. They may have just been rushed, but like if you're seeing stuff like that looks like text speech, or there's no capitalization and no punctuation marks at all, these should be red flags that maybe you shouldn't be doing business with these individuals. You want to ask yourself, is this a reputable organization? Will they be easy to work with going into the future? Can I trust them to pay me for the work that I've done? That's what this all boils down to. You really want to do your research. This could be through Googling the company's name, or if you're on Upwork or some other platform like that, looking through and seeing what other people rated them. You really want to get a feel for who exactly it is that you're working with before you accept the job. So after you've done your research, you've gotten a good feel for the client, and you decide that it's a good idea to go ahead and go forward with the project, you want to make sure that in an effort to maintain a healthy relationship with them, that you are managing their expectations along the way, right? You could be one of the best workers in your field ever, and it could be that what they're asking for, nobody but you could possibly do. Yet, if you promise them more than you can deliver and you come up short, even if that was a fantastic feat that you did, right? Even if that was like the most impressive thing in your field ever, you're still going to have an upset client because you overpromised. Anytime you're going into a project, even if it's a client that you've had for a while, but especially on a new client, you want to make sure that you're under promising and over delivering. So let's say that a client approaches you and they have an issue, and you think that you can complete that in a best case scenario in 1 week, and a worst case scenario of 3 weeks. And that's assuming that, for the 1 week number, everything works out in your favor and everything lines up perfectly. And for that 3 week number, that's assuming that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. It's a good idea to give the client, maybe 2.5 or something like that, as your estimate. You want to have it close enough to that worst case scenario that you'll want to tell your client, hey, I think this will probably take about, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at the most, right? Don't even mention the 1 week to them, because that's if everything goes right. And likely what they're going to hear is when you say that first number, they're going to think, oh, okay, that's when they're going to deliver it to us, right? That 3 week number is just, if worst case scenario. And they're likely going to start expecting results any day now after that 1 week mark. Okay, so you're already in a position where you're not really wowing them, right? Now, if you get it done within that first week, after you've told them, hey, I'm anticipating 2 to 3 weeks for this project, then they'll be super impressed. You've just halved the time that they were expecting. You obviously don't want to give them too easy of numbers to achieve. right? Like they're, especially if it's a new client, they're probably entertaining other bids or proposals for the project as well. So you still want to shoot them a number that's competitive, right? Like you don't want to give them some figures that it's, if I just am lazy on the project and I don't really hustle, I can probably do this in about a month. That's not how you want to approach the situation. You want to give them fair numbers, assuming that you're going to, be competitive and try to impress them. But again, the whole point of managing expectations is you don't want to give them the best case scenario numbers. Because there's no winning in that situation. You meet the deadline, right? If you say 1 week, I can do this for you in 1 week, and you meet that 1 week, okay, great. You've done what you said, which is good. However, if something goes wrong, now you're at 1.5 weeks, and the client is thinking, wow, this guy's 50% over in terms of the time, right? So you've got to be mindful of the risks associated with what it is that you're telling the client. And lastly, setting boundaries is vitally important with your clients. This is a mistake that I made probably for the first full year that I was freelancing, and I would always be on call. If someone shot me an email, I was quick to respond. It doesn't matter if it was 8 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock in the morning, whatever. I was always on all the time, completely at their beck and call. And this is really bad for both parties involved. Yeah, they're excited because you're responsive, but it is so easy to get burnt out when you're doing that. And you really have to take time to recharge your batteries and take care of yourself. Or, otherwise, the quality of work that you're going to give them is going to just diminish, right, on a long enough timeline. Eventually, you're going to start resenting them, and it may end up that you just up and quit on them, or just completely lash out and stop responding or whatever. And that's a very likely possibility because you're human. For certain situations, it will be necessary to be on call. And sometimes there's just nothing that you can do about that. For instance, I provide hosting services for some of my clients. And in those situations, I'm using Uptime Robot, and I get text alerts if there's any sites that go down. And in the event that happens, I'll get the text. I normally keep my laptop fairly close to me, and so it doesn't really matter what time it is as long as I'm awake. Sometimes, and so it doesn't really matter what time it is. I'll get that text and I'll log in and see what's up and do whatever I can to try and minimize any downtime. But that's it. There are no other situations that, for me, that warrant being on call, right? If it's something that the client did themselves, a mistake that they made, or if it's just something that came up and they feel that it's an emergency, but maybe it's not necessarily impacting their business in a very significant way, feel free to shoot me an email at 9 o'clock at night or wherever. But most of my clients are well aware that I'm going to wait until the next day to respond to something like that, unless it's an absolute emergency. And most of your clients are probably going to be okay with that. If you think most of the professionals that they deal with, they're not on call 24/7. They may have a maintenance person that they can call, but likely it's going to, if they're dealing with anything that is 24/7, it's likely a third party company, and they're rotating people out and stuff like that. they don't expect to be able to call their doctor, at 1 o'clock at night, and figure out what's wrong with them. They know that rather than call the doctor, they have to show up at the ER, or, say your mechanic. They don't, they blow a flat, they're not going to call their mechanic to come fix that. So again, maintaining healthy client relationships is what's really going. It's going to be your bread and butter. That's really what's going to determine the health of your freelancing business. As soon as one of these relationships turns sour, it can just become a huge, time and opportunity suck. Uh, you know, a healthy client relationship is going to involve, trust on both sides, and a respect for boundaries. If you have a client who all of a sudden is trying to micromanage you and, tell you how to do this service or that service, or they're questioning your work, or they're questioning an invoice, that's when you really have to take a step back and look and just see, is it really worth it? Is this time to kind of, back away from this relationship and move on, because there's a associated opportunity cost. Anytime that, any second that you spend going over an invoice with a client or explaining your rationale for doing something, or, that's time that could potentially be spent elsewhere, on a more easygoing project. There's always an opportunity cost associated with that. And that's not to say that you should never expect a client to question your work, or question an invoice. These things happen, and just providing good customer service is being willing and able to explain a bill or to explain why you did something. The issue comes in when it's a reoccurring thing, or when you notice that it's taking a significant amount of your day, you know, backpedaling and not doing more productive things, but instead, explaining to this one particular client. So I hope that you found this information useful. Hopefully this kind of helps put you in the proper mindset of, what kind of clients you should be on the lookout for, what kind of behaviors that you should be on the lookout for to avoid, or clients that you should potentially seek. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to subscribe, you can do so on iTunes and Stitcher, as well as YouTube. You can also check the website over at www.teachmetofreelance.com. I look forward to seeing you next week.